What's up, y'all? Today we are talking about the roll, which is probably, arguably, the most important of the ornaments that you'll learn. To my ear, anyway, it's the one that makes your playing stand out as sounding like traditional Irish players do. It's the one that every instrument can play, so it's probably the most important one to get right, I think, anyway. So let's see if we can get it. Hopefully by now you're feeling comfortable playing both the cut and the tap, because as I've mentioned before, the roll is a combination of both of those, so it's going to be pretty important for you to be able to play those comfortably and consistently before you dive in with the roll. But that said, how do you do a roll? Well, it's a combination of both. It's the cut first, followed by the tap, and I'm going to start a roll on E. That's the first one or the lowest note that we can do a roll on. There's no way to do a roll on the note D because there's nothing to tap below the note D. So, the roll on E. So it's a cut, followed by a tap. Cut first, and a tap. And those are the movements that you need, and that's sort of the rhythm that you're going for. Ultimately, nice and quick, just like we do the cut and the tap. But if it needs to be slow at first, just like both of those, and just to kind of get your fingers moving in the right directions, nothing wrong with that. The speed will always come later. So if you're going to play it nice and slowly, here's the scale that I would do. This is the exercise that I think will help and get your fingers used to it. Couple of notes there. Depending on which finger you use for cuts, your rolls will be different, possibly different than the way that I do it. As a refresher, I always do cuts with the top finger or the bottom finger on the top hand for the lower half or so of the whistle, and then the top finger for the top two notes. That's how I do it. A lot of folks do it differently. Point being, however you do your rolls is going to depend on how you do your cuts. The taps, in theory, should always be the same. The bottom half, the back half of the roll should always be the same. Other thing to keep in mind, again, is that you do want to get that sort of a jig rhythm, the faster version of the roll, so your scale ultimately, your exercise ultimately, should kind of lean towards this. In time, but up-tempo enough to where you're starting to get that feel, that sort of a wavy jig kind of a move, which is what the roll is really designed for. It sort of automatically adds that rhythm, that groove to your playing. We're going to talk a lot more about the where and the when of where and the when do we use these ornaments in next week's video, the last video of this series. But homework for this week is to see if you can find a couple of spots to work these in. I'm going to give you an example with the jig, Jim Ward's that we did back in lesson 4 or 5, somewhere in that range. There's a couple of really good spots. So as a refresher, basic melody of that tune. If you wanted to throw a roll in right off the bat, hopefully you can hear how it automatically adds in a bit of that 6/8 jig kind of sound. It's got a bit of that lift to it. And that's what you're looking for, and those sorts of spots are what you're looking for. So see if you can find a few in that tune or whichever of the tunes that we're working on that you want to dive into. They've all got places for it. And that's what we'll talk about next week. Where and when, why, how, we'll answer all those questions. Stick around, and I will see you all then. Cheers.